Okay, can you please unmute?
Yeah, I'm unmuted now.
Okay, fantastic. So, okay, thanks, John, for being here. We also should have Gerhard. I'm going to unmute Gerhard, Hugo, which is also participating to the panel. So we are a little bit over, and so we will recuperate some of the questions in the later stage, because we really would like to make this interactive. And so we have an internal policy which we just breached to have at least 5 minutes of questions at the end of every panel. And so having questions which are very short and answers which are 1 minute. So we will try to stick to that. So this panel is going to be, it's on the trustless computing paradigms. So the socio-technical paradigms that will qualify something to be trustless computing as far as security. And we'll go on up until 4:35 and then open to questions. So let me introduce first the speakers. Okay, number one, let me introduce John Shamah. John Shamah has been a main leader of our association. He was a co-coordinator of the original research proposal that we submitted to the European Union, and he and him aggregated all these unique partners all around the world, and so he's been really a co-father of this thing. So we thank him for this, and it's been a long journey. And he's a great expert on research proposal at the European Union, on EMAN or e-identity, and so he's very well regarded in the e-identity community, and as a president of EMA as well. Instead we have Gerhard Knecht, also brings quite a rare expertise, since he was, yes, Gerhard, hi, how are you? So, okay. So that's okay. Basically, it's a Central European salute. Okay, so basically, Gerhard brings an incredible expertise, because since 2013 to 2018, now he's happily retired. He was Chief Information Security Officer for UNISYS, and also Chief of their security services. And so he represented the UNISYS, which was a huge consultancy, at the time. Now it's reduced. It was at some point maybe 100,000 employees across the world. Is that correct, Gerhard?
At one stage we had 120,000, but we have reduced a few.
Exactly. So he, in this position, he traveled all around the world to work with the largest enterprises and governments to really try to protect them at the best. And so we entered in contact maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And he was quite excited. He started getting excited about zero trust, which is a related concept, which is getting very fancy nowadays. And he got quite interested in what we did. So let me pass. Well, before I pass on the word to John and Gerhard, let me just introduce briefly the trustless computing certification, trustless computing paradigms. Okay, so. In fact, I have to thank John, because he told me about the pronunciation of this word, which I had gotten wrong for many years. So thank you so much, John. So very well, the paradigms. This is a summary version, so I'm going to go through it in 5 minutes, because otherwise we're going to go off again. So number one, it assumes that there's extremely skilled attackers willing to invest tens of millions of dollars to compromise a tool at the supply chain, including through economic pressure. Because it's history, and nation states not only try to put backdoors, but they will buy your supplier, they will corrupt it, they will threaten to make sure that they have access. So you have to have that kind of assumption. You need to have extremely user accountable oversight of all hardware and organizational process. So, for example, in the foundry, there are some processes during the fabrication of a chip, and if you weren't there, there's no way to ensure that no funny thing happened. And so you need to actually be there. It's not something that you can test afterwards. There are some oversight that need to be in place in certain phases of the supply chain and life cycle. You need extreme levels of security review in relation to complexity. So we said transparency, yes, is one requirement, but unless you have a fine minimization and you have extreme level of review, and also there are also formal methods and so on, then it's not going to work. It also is going to try to emphasize as much as possible, not only that these technologies are inspectable, but also that they're open source, because being open source also has additional advantages in respect to just being able to look at the source code, because you can engender more people using the technology, economics, more people looking at it. So it can provide much value and also attract ethical hackers, which is critical for the system. So this system, doesn't want to create levels of security which are only affordable for rich people. So there's going to be a level of royalties and patents and costs which are going to be capped, so that it's not going to create something in which only the rich will have freedom and privacy. So it includes only critical components that have that are inspectable designs. There's a little replication here. Okay, and then of course the key thing is subject to a standard setting institution that is technically proficient and effective and independent, as we said, because you have all these great principles in there, but if you don't have an institution that can be trusted to actually uncompromisingly apply them, they remain declarations on a piece of paper. They also need to ensure that any staff, management, or shareholders of the provider of a certain IT service, and even its suppliers, which are in a position to actually affect, that they are basically vetted. So basically, who is actually working on the code? What is their background? What they did? What they didn't do? What is the likelihood that they're spies or they're paid by somebody else? What is the likelihood they could be blackmailed or threatened because they didn't pay taxes 5 years before? So all of that comes into the certification. It makes part of the element. And by the way, also the training of the use. So the usage of a device is part of the security of the device. So that was also trained. And another key element is the lawful access element that we talked about. So every system which is certified by TCCB will offer offline key and data recovery, because the user may die, the user may lose his passphrase, and so there is a need for data recovery. Anyhow, in nearly all people that will be using it. If it's a spy trying to use it, then they could live with the fact that they lose the data, but not every ordinary user. Ordinary users will have their most valuable information. So you need to have this function anyway. So this is going to be provided, and it's going to be mandatory provided. This function to have data on a server-side infrastructure will also going to be used with hosting rooms in 3 different countries of 3 different military intelligence alliance to store this data, and enable also to offer governments to show up at this hosting room. And okay, so they show up at this hosting room, and they have to convince either 5 randomly selected citizens, if it's a Swiss authority, if it's a local jurisdiction. So there's like a jury body system that acts as a filter between the legitimate requests of the state and the rights of privacy of the individual. And so if it's a Swiss government request or from a local jurisdiction, then these 5 randomly selected citizens would actually make this call together with an attorney. If it's an international request coming straight, then there is an international judicial board made of the chief justice, which will evaluate this request based on international human rights, legality in the jurisdiction of the requesting authority, but even public safety. Because a request could actually breach international rights, but actually be so important for the public safety that it's warranted. So that's the basics of it. Gerhard, let me give the floor to you, and so you can give your take on this subject.
Sure, thank you very much. Well, when I was at UNISYS, I had one aim that was keeping UNISYS safe, and a second aim to be trustworthy to supply security services to our customers. And the second one was even more challenging than the first one, because the first one, the job of a CISO, yes, you can be done. You're never going to be absolutely safe. Yeah, there's some boundaries around it. But when it comes to actually safeguarding and keeping our customers secure by using security operation centers, by providing consultancy and tools, that was an even larger challenge. And our customers always asked, why can we trust you? Why are you in this business? And why shouldn't we go to somebody else? And the challenge was always to be convincing enough to tell them a good story and tell them why they can trust us. And why do I say a good story? I use that on purpose because nobody is absolutely secure. You are only as secure as you make it and as far as you have thought, but never any further. So I never pretended that we are absolutely secure. But I could tell a good story, what we have done, what we have implemented, how we have it implemented, how it is being audited and revised, and so on. So by being open, by explaining exactly how it is set up, it helped me getting across, and also retaining customers and gaining new ones. So standards, I soon found out, are very important. It is not just a nice to have, it is absolutely essential to have a standard that you can point to, because saying, I have done all the right things, I have done this, I've done that, that's not good enough. You have to say, I have done everything, and don't just trust me because I'm following a good standard. And the standard has been peer-reviewed over time, so it is maybe not perfect, but at least it's the best that we have. So standards are important, and my word, trust me, everything is fine, that was not even a starting point. Now, let's go one step further. Let's look into each standard. There are many standards. The main standard that I've used always is the ISO 27000 standards, and I go back to way back when it was called 7799, and I worked with the English developers of the standard, BSI, to develop that standard into 17799 and then the 27000 series. It gives us great leverage in making sure that people understand they are secure. So, without going into details, it is important that the standard is accepted as such, that it has been peer-reviewed, that regularly it is being updated, it is published as an ISO standard, and so on and so on. The standard has to be good. Second part, and the second part is just as important, is how has the standard been implemented and is being audited? Because the implementation can be one way or the other, can be lip service only, can be really good. Let's not get into that because that's a huge problem. But needless to say, it is not 100% certain that you'll end up secure, even if you implement any standard, or even if you implement any standard really well. You're not yet secure. Next step is auditing. How do you make sure that if you have implemented the standard, somebody says, yeah, well, that guy has done a good job, that company is all right, and that is the way it has to be implemented? Well, you need an audit standard. You need an approach that says who should be able to be an auditor, how qualified they should be, and what background they should have, number one. Number two, how they audit, what review process they use, what standards they deploy in their executing an audit, how their peer reviews are, how their management reviews are, and things like that. And you may not know it, but there is even an ISO standard for how to audit an ISO standard. And there is even an ISO standard above it that says, how do the organizations that are reviewing these standards, how auditing, what standards they have to apply, what is the standard they have to apply to be standardized for auditing a standard. It's all one hand grabbing the other one, making sure we don't drop anything. So within that framework of identifying a good standard, applying it properly, auditing it properly, and having a process and a company that actually does it well, that opens up very difficult avenues and difficult challenges, because everything is fraught with problems. Nothing is secure. Nothing can be guaranteed, because the implementation quite often lacks the quality that it should have. Let's go for something which is relatively easy. There's a standard for encryption. It tells you how to encrypt, how to do it. That it can be audited, that can be peer reviewed, the code can be made public in a way, but how it is then finally implemented and how it is woven into software, that itself can be with problems, can be with flaws, with bugs. So even using something as simple as a standard on how to create an encryption algorithm, that can be difficult to audit and difficult to verify if it has been implemented properly to the very end. Now, can you think of how difficult it is with all these myriads of intersections of hardware, software, networking, and so on, and processes? This is very difficult. So any standard, in a way, will fail, whatever you apply, because it is not going to cover everything. So you have to have a few things that must be done. These are then the corners on which you can rely. These corners must be built into a standard, must be built in any environment, and also there has to be standards on how to audit it, how to verify it. And any trust board around it must define everything from the very beginning, from the standard, to the implementation guidelines, to the audit requirements, and the requirements for how to assess auditors and how to allow auditors. And needless to say, this trust computing board is not going to be trusted just because we say it. It has to be bound and tied into the larger network of certification bodies. And we have to comply with all the rules that are applicable to certification bodies, and some ISO standards that define how audits are being done. There's even an ISO standard that says how standards are being written, and how to write an ISO standard requires you to use an ISO standard for it. So we have to use those standards, because we are certainly not going to be above the law, and we are going to be inside the whole community of trusted advisors, of trusted people within the world, so that nobody will actually ask and say, these trustless guys in Geneva, what are they doing? Can we trust them? We are going to be incorporated in the entire Flash backbone and network of all the security organizations and trusted standard organizations that make sure that we are seen as what we have to be, as a trusted body ourselves, as a peer with all the other national and local and other standard giving trust and certification bodies. So that's the challenge. It is almost something that it's something that is possibly never achieved as 100% as it can be done. But the current standards, current bodies, current auditors, they are nowhere near enough good for what they have been doing, what they should be doing. So we need to up their game. We have to do a game change. We need a change completely in the way our standards and audits of standards are implemented. And because we cannot wait for anybody else to do it, we have to do it ourselves. So let's up the game. Let's improve the whole story. and let's create a trusted body, certification body that is better than anything else. Because we know from practical experience, and I've seen it day in, day out, as being audited. I have audited my customers myself. I know the flaws and where people fudge, where people are not certain, where things can be fall between the cracks. Those have all to be eliminated. We have to have a way, an approach that is really secure and can be trusted.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so thanks a lot, Gerhard, for this extremely clear presentation. And you made quite a few clarifications that are very important. In fact, now, for example, the fact that our certification needs to be downward compliant to others' certification. In fact, since the beginning, it will be downward compliant to Common Criteria 3 and EIDAS, and it will use the same language and instruments of existing standardization, like especially Common Criteria, to the extent that they fit. So, for example, you mentioned that during standardization, they standardize some components, but then you have a component which is standardized to a certain security level. Another component is standardized to exactly the same security level. You put them together, new vulnerabilities come up, and so you need to basically certify something across the integration of all the relevant stacks, and also as they evolve, right? Because an update now can actually make it vulnerable. So much so that now with Jan, initially, this certification body, we didn't want to create a new certification body. We made a proposal of how current certification should be changed to achieve this goal. But then nobody did it, and so we had a plan B built in. And so, but thanks for making all these clarifications, and that's great. So let me now just pass on the word to I think let me start with John, and so John, maybe you want to tell something about how we got here. So let me, there you go.
Thank you very much and welcome. This is indeed an interesting time, as they say, to see how we go forward. Quite often it's good to look and see how we got to where we are. And I'm not sure if everybody is familiar with the story of how we got to this point, but I think that will probably be quite interesting and quite helpful for all of us here. So I'm sorry, a couple of slides may be the same as Rufo's, but I apologize anyway. So really what I thought I'd talk about a little bit is the origins of trustless computing and how we got to this point. And where we are is with certification body TCCB, CyberSpace, and really trying to establish global democratic digital sphere. Really important. The more I think about it, and there are questions that I know some of the audience may answer, but there are lots of applications that we are only now just seeing as technologies move, the usefulness of TCCB and how we actually, what we actually do and what we provide to the ecosystem grows all the time. So going back to 2014, we EID Authentication Services Regulation come into being, and it started to get adopted into law, maybe not implemented so much, but initially, but adopted into law. And it started to highlight awareness of the complexities of what trust is. And we began to realize in the community that this wasn't the only issue in the world that had to be dealt with. And that started the idea and the concept. And I like this one. This is I do like that picture. But it really is, you realize that you can't get one or the other. You have to have both. For 2016, Rufo and myself, we decided to introduce and develop the concept further. And we used the Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Funding Program, and that seemed to be the appropriate mechanism to achieve funding and to get our acts organized. But nonetheless, we put together 2 submissions, a research and innovation action, and also a coordination and support action, which was much more towards the certification. And those 2 submissions were in parallel, and we put them together so that we would be able to order our thoughts in a way that would move us forward and move the concept forward. And we achieved a good score in the review, but we weren't successful, unfortunately. But what we did do was establish our clear methodology and the active support of many well-known centers of excellence, such as KU Leuven, and Goethe University. And we had 13 active, well-known partners involved with us to in the bids and into the proposals, which in themselves were very, very useful and formed the basis of us moving forward in time. And the outcome really was a vision, a clear vision of how we would start producing the TCCB and the realization of democratic and competent systems and paradigms. The idea being to standardize, certify, and regulate interoperable digital systems for human communications and their resulting digital sphere civic net. And I'll take issue with Rufo in some of the things that he said now, because I don't think it's just for human communications. There's opportunities for lots of other forms of communications where TCCB and the principles embodied would be very, very important. Also, CivicNet was looking at producing very, very high levels of confidentiality and integrity while ensuring legitimate, lawful access. And this is a thing now we're seeing more now post-COVID, or nearly post-COVID, towards post-COVID. We're beginning to see large numbers of the population starting to understand that they aren't going to be safe just by remembering their 4-letter password, or they're not going to be safe by leaving themselves open. It just doesn't work. You've got to have a different system. The systems that we have at the moment just don't provide enough. You take even, for example, Zoom, where a system that we're using at the moment, where they've gone through lots of changes and they still aren't as secure as they should be without oversight and things like that. People begin to see it, not many, but it's a start. So our main message really is in cyberspace, and I apologize reading this, in cyberspace, we can't really choose between freedom and public safety. It is a both or neither challenge. You've got to have both of them. And the solution is key to bringing the democracy principle into the digital age. And I like this, it actually fills it in quite well. And we're talking trustless, and the other model that I see very much is touched a little bit upon by Rufo, which is the idea of general elections. Here, if you go to any country, there will be trustless methods to ensure that the voting is valid. Whether you're using an electronic system, there's still processes involved which determine that it can't be tampered with. It can't be tampered with, and it's trustworthy all the way from the vote can be trusted all the way from the person's hand to being counted and added up. And there are different ways of doing it. If I go in the UK, or if I go, or if I look in some electronic systems that they're using in Benelux, they are all trustworthy and safe, and they're made that way. And there's a lot of effort put in to making general elections for the issues of when there was some doubt last year, and whatever the politics, if there was any doubt whatsoever in the system, it can be a problem and lead to confusion, which is why even general elections, you need to have absolutely a trustless system, something that doesn't rely on the goodwill of somebody else. And that's really important, and a good way of explaining it be a way that is easily understandable to almost anybody that votes now. We've got a number of security safeguards in Trustless, transparency, and again, Rufo mentioned some of these oversight, reviews, and certifications, very, very complex certifications, which are far deeper than what you see from qualified trust service providers for EIDAS, for example. They're much more complex, but then they provide much more stronger holistic security and safety. So where we are now, we have that, we have a leadership and certification body, and we're starting the spin-off using TCA, Trustless Computing Association, the computing certification body, and obviously communications methods, including Geneva, last time we were there, and here, and free and safe. So the very fact that we're starting, although it's a complex and slow method, we've got some very strong foundations to move forward now. And those don't take overnight to build. The best ones take a long time to get right. And that's what we've been doing, and that's what Rufo and the team have been building strongly and diligently over the years. And towards a post-pandemic world, I was trying to find the right words for this, but I think post-pandemic, going towards a post-pandemic world, not in it yet, the spin-off startup, the conferences to disseminate and communicate, aiming at getting public funding, dual-use initiatives, and the clusters and collaboration with academia are all really important to get us going. And in the end, it's all important to do that, but realize it's not an overnight job. We're going to work hard, and we're going to put strong foundations into the ecosystem. That's it. Thank you very much indeed. I hope you got a little bit of a background as to where we came from, and that it's not going to be an overnight thing, but we've been working hard for 5 years diligently to get to where we are today and to move forward again. And well done, Rufo, you're the driver behind this as well, but so many other people have also been involved in helping, so it's great. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much, John, for this a little bit rundown on the history.